Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today in the second part of our Secure Remote Working webinar series, Maintaining Secure User Desktop Workflows. I'm Maria, I'm in charge of the marketing department here at Storage Made Easy, and I'm really excited to introduce our speaker, Jim Liddle, CEO of Storage Made Easy. Hello, Jim.
Hi, Mariado.
So we had many registrations for this webinar, but as we all know, some of the registrations just wait for this webinar to be recorded and then sent to them. So as a quick reminder, again, don't worry, this webinar will be recorded and then you'll be able to access it anytime on our YouTube channel at SMB Storage and also on our video gallery on our website, storagemadeeasy.com. As a piece of extra information, we've also included our remote working solution brief, so you can download it directly from the handouts panel. Also, feel free to leave any questions you may have during the session in the chat box, and we'll go through them at the end of the presentation and demo. Also, before we get started, here's a quick question for you all, which is, are you looking into implementing a remote working solution for your workforce in the next 3 months? So if you could answer that. So as you can see here, yeah, 71% of you are actually looking into implementing a remote working solution. So this webinar is going to be really useful for you then. Alrighty. So after these, I'll just hand over to you, Jim.
Great, thanks, Mariado. Thanks for attending this second session on remote working. My name is Jim Liddle. I'm the founder and CEO of Storage Made Easy, and we produce the enterprise multi-cloud software solution, the Enterprise File Fabric. In this particular session, we'll be focused on how companies can continue to enable access to the various on-premises and on-cloud storage silos that they have, whilst maintaining secure end-user workflows. First of all, I want to do a quick recap on the first session we had for those who weren't here. So these sessions on remote working have been centered on how companies can securely continue to use their existing storage assets, even though their employees are no longer in the office. And we kind of took a look at this slide previously, and we give a brief overview of the Enterprise File Fabric because the whole session is discussed in the context of our software solution. The File Fabric, which is a multi-cloud solution that works with a company's unstructured data estate that it already has, i.e. we're not bringing something new into the equation. We're not bringing new cloud storage. We're not asking you to use something new. It works with what you already have. And I thought it would be useful just to, talk about a few of the core principles that I had, when I first had the idea for this product. The first core principle I had was really that it should be not another cloud storage solution. I kind of felt there were enough of those as it were. And in my experience, most companies, even the small ones, have several places, if not more, where they store data. And the reality is that's only become more widespread with the rapid cloud adoption that sort of occurred over the last few years and is still occurring. I wanted what eventually became the File Fabric to really provide a 360-degree view of the data that they already had, for administrators, for IT, and for end users. My second principle was that I wanted the solution to be open. So what do I mean by that? I mean that access to data shouldn't necessarily need to be through our product for a company to get access to its assets. No weird hashing of file names, no weird data sets. It should be transparent, what you put in is what you get out the other end. This means it can support bimodal access. For example, you can get in through the File Fabric, or if a company wants direct access, they can get in directly. So if you're using, products like Amazon or Cloudian, or you're on your file share, your SMB file share, if you go directly, you still get access to the same data set. From our perspective, if you go in that way, we just pick up the changes in our product and new files on our next access. Now, having worked for several software companies in my time, one thing I was, very cognizant of is that I didn't want to end up building a product that assumed it was the center of the universe. What do I mean by that? I mean that, where a company had existing solutions that had touch points into files, I didn't want to introduce something new. So a good example is, authentication and authorization. Companies already have good identity access management solutions. Many use Active Directory, LDAP, or SAML. So we wanted to provide a full single sign-on experience using what they already had. And that core principle sort of echoes through the product. Lastly, from the very start, I was focused on providing a multi-cloud end-user application, not, a multi-cloud physical data tiering, data movement application. Although in fairness, we do have some aspects of that in our product. But I was really focused on, what does multi-cloud look like for end users and end user workflows? And the product, became built out, and it became kind of obvious that providing this 360-degree view of data, meant very different things to different people in the organization. To a data architect, it was about data governance, classifications, access to data. To a data security officer, it was about mitigating data risk, not just from a cybersecurity viewpoint, but, for example, from accidental PHI exposure, which I guess we've all seen in the news. These core principles really turned it into the product that we have today, a data agnostic solution to providing a unified view of data without moving or replicating the data in any way, but using smart indexing to facilitate a productive single view of data that encompasses that 360-degree view for users, IT, data architects, security officers, and ultimately facilitating a much more productive way to collaborate across data sets and locate and work with data assets. Now, in the first session, we showed how easy it was for the file fabric to index locally stored data. We took a look at a share, and we took a look at, I think it was Cloudian object storage, and we showed how easy it was to make that available at web scale to remote users without having to use cumbersome, slow VPNs. That is particularly apparent when you're using SMB, because SMB is not an internet-friendly protocol and it's slow, and even if you speed up your VPN, it doesn't necessarily solve the problem. And additionally, we showed how we could extend this out into other corporate data sets that have become more prevalently used because of COVID, things like Amazon S3 and Azure storage. James, who was driving the demo on the last session, he also demonstrated the policy-driven nature of the product, in which data governance and compliance obligations could be transparently honored through the policies within the product. So today, we're going to look at what this really looks like to end users. We had a lot of feedback from the session last time that says, that's great, we know a lot about the product, we've seen how the policies work, he stepped us through some of the web pieces on the server side. How does it look like for end users? And we had quite a lot of questions about that at the end. So it kind of made sense to revisit that and dig into it in more detail. So I'm going to have a demo. The core piece of this session really is to demonstrate this to you. I'll be going through various touch points that end users would use in their daily work routine. The first thing to point out is that the demo, we're doing it on consumer grade home broadband, given the nature of the lockdown that most of us are experiencing today. So I apologize in advance for any dropouts or slowdowns. I have my fingers crossed that the demo gods will be with us. We'll also be moving about between various pieces of technology. So to set the scene, I'm using a MacBook, but I also have a Windows VM running. I also have another OS VM running, and we'll be transparently swapping between those. So that can cause some slowdowns and some issues sometimes. So just bear with me if it does. Okay, so let me first of all flick to our File Fabric appliance. So I've got a File Fabric appliance set up. It's hosted. It's basically stuck on an IaaS cloud service, and it's hooked up to basically an Office SMB Share. That should be plenty to demonstrate to you how the File Fabric works. One of the first things to notice is we have a message on the front. Message on the front is for users who may be logging into the product set, who now have to work remotely, and it gives you the ability to give some instructions. So the file fabric, has a lot of features, and even today we'll only touch upon some of those. But one of them is this intranet type capability to, share messages and put widgets on the front, very similar to for people who've used SharePoint. So you can, not only can you add messages like this, you can have RSS widgets, you can have Twitter feed widgets, you can set up Trello boards, etc. In this case, given where the world is right now, the likelihood is a lot of organizations will have a message similar to this. In terms of the structure of our demo environment, I'll just briefly take you through that. We have an Office SMB Share. It's got a couple of directories in it. It's got a backups directory, a project docs directory, and it's got a team folder called users and a demo user. And I'm at the moment, the demo user is the admin, and I'm functioning as the demo user. And I actually haven't got anything in my own home user environment, but I am using project docs and the docs directory. So that's kind of sets the scene for you about what we have set up, at least from an infrastructure perspective. So one of the things I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about home drives. So we're going to flick to our Windows environment, hopefully. And we're going to take a look at the home drives that come with the product from a desktop perspective. So many users who work from offices, particularly those whose infrastructure includes storage area networks or network attached storage, will use home drives. They'll be used to the concept of having a home drive, maybe even more than one drive letter. We use exactly the same concept for our cloud drives. They are, for all intents and purposes, a network share as far as the operating system is concerned. But, and this is a key piece, they work over HTTPS, not SMB, and as ultimately they're an application underneath the hood, they can be smart about caching data and also eviction policies. And we have these drives not just for Windows, we also have them for Mac and for Linux, and they can be accessed just like a normal share directly from Windows Explorer, or from any applications that you may have open. And if we click on our cloud drive, we'll see the same view of data that we just saw directly in the cloud, and essentially it's pulling that listing back and it's presenting it to us, and we get access to it. At the point we start to download anything, we'll see that it'll go away and it'll fetch it back. Essentially, what this listing is a stub list of the remote file system, and as you browse through it, it downloads the next stub list. And if you need to access a file, they're downloaded on demand, and then they're cached depending on the eviction policies that have been set up. So from an end user perspective, it's really, really transparent. And if we go into one of these directories, where you see, and I don't know whether you can see this because the screen might be a little small, you can see a little cloud icon above this one, for example, and you can see a little tick icon above this one. That lets me know that this particular document is being looked at, because as I was setting it up, I double-clicked and it opened, and I took a look at it and it was downloaded. And this particular document here is still in cache. So it's a really easy way for you to understand whether you're dealing with documents that are local or you're dealing with documents that are remote. If we went away and we looked at our OS X view, and this is another VM, essentially we'll see the same thing. So if we go to the drive, again, we've got similar access here, and we've got similar access to the directories, exactly the same. And if we had a Linux machine, booted up as part of this, we would see the same thing. And the beauty of this is that you can do quite a lot here. So let's just go back to our drive, and let's go into our SMB share, and let's just have a little look at some of the things you can do. So if we look at the project docs, We've got one here, MStream technical data sheet. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a right click, and we'll see that we've got, these extra actions here. These actions are part of what gets integrated when you install the drive, and they allow me to do some extra things, with the files, because obviously we're inside Windows Explorer. We're not in an app. We're in a bog standard Windows Explorer that, comes with Microsoft. And you notice when we were in the OS X side, we were also in Finder. Nothing, it's not our application. So this gives us a mechanism to be able to go away and do something. So, for example, there may be some comments on this file that I want to go away and have a look at. So we can see that on this file that there was a comment, I can see it's under review and I've been asked not to release it. There are also, other things I can do from here. We've got this view and annotate piece here. So one of the things with the with our file fabric is we work a lot in different industries, and sometimes we've built in extra workflows to support that industry. One of which is we do a lot with companies who work with PDFs, and often they have a need to view and annotate PDFs. Sometimes they do that with applications, but sometimes we actually facilitate it with the file fabric. So I've just clicked on that view and annotate, and it's actually gone away and it's opened up that particular document from the desktop in my web browser into my server-side file fabric, and it's allowing me to go away and do some edits. So I could, for example, go away and decide, well, I'm not really too keen on this section here. Please don't release this as is. And as you can appreciate, this is something that you could add an issue here and say that what's my issue? It needs review. This will change. All the issues will be in this color. Excuse the typos. I won't go back and correct those. And you can also do other things. So for example, if there was some sensitive data here, I may want to redact it. And I can go right the way along. And I could do the whole line. And so you've got a very, very easy mechanism, to collaborate on this. And you can save the annotations, so that it doesn't alter the original PDF. They're kept in the metadata. And the next time, if this is in the team folder, if somebody goes back and needs to take a look at the same PDF, they can go in and they can review our annotations. So it's actually a really nice way to be able to work with PDFs, even if you don't have a PDF application. And of course, with everybody working away from home, there's a need, perhaps to go into documents and, mark invoices as approved, or, things of that nature, or even, access this from an iPad and, write your signature, etc. So all that can be done as part of a user workflow without ever having to need to leave the file fabric. Other thing you'll notice is that if I try and just close the tab without saving my annotations, it's savvy to that, and it says, well, if you leave, you might lose any of the annotations you've made on this page. So do you want to stay? In this case, I'm going to say no. I'm not particularly interested in doing that, so I'll go. So those drives also allow you to work in a pure play application view. So if you want to treat them just like you would treat your normal home drive, you can. What that means is that you could, for example, you can double click on a file and it will open the associated file handler for that file. And that works, pretty well with things like Word. If we double click on that, Word template that we've got in our cloud drive, you'll notice that it's been locked. What does that mean? That means that, for other users, they won't be able to edit that file. They'll get read-only access, but if they try and edit it, they'll be told actually that the file is locked. And then we can choose to change things around. And then we can exit and we can say save. and then we can see that we don't really need to do anything. It's going to go away. It's going to save it. It's going to unlock the document so that other people can actually go away and edit it. And that's all pretty transparent. And it works, very similar, across on OS X. It will open it up in the default application handler. If that application handler happens to be LibreOffice, then it would open LibreOffice. If it was Kingston Office, it would open Kingston Office. It doesn't matter. The other thing that we've done is we have some built-in shell access outside of the shell access that is in the drive. So you often end up in a place where you're kind of moving around, and you kind of see this guy here, and you think, I actually want that in my, I want to quickly get that onto my cloud because I want to share it out with somebody, or I just need to make sure I have it. So what you can do is, you'll notice that, on these normal files when we're outside the drive, I have an extra option called upload to cloud. So I can literally just right click and say, hey, I want to upload that to cloud. It's going to go away. It's going to authenticate me. And then it will let me decide where I want to, put that, depending on the broadband speed, of course. Here we go. I think, there we go. So if I want to save that now, I can choose to go away, and I can decide to save that in one of my directories. I won't do it this time just because it'll probably glitch the broadband access stream that we're already using. But it's a really, really simple way of being able to do that. And similarly, we have the same type of things on OS X. So if I go across to my OS X, first of all, if I go into my drive, just like we saw in some of those on actions on Windows, if I do a right click, I have some extra actions. I don't need to go back into the product, even though I'm browsing around in a application that actually is it's not a file fabric application, it's just Finder. I can just go in, I can say, well, I want to share a link to this, and it'll come up and it'll allow me to share a link. So that's really, really easy. Each of the products, depending on whether they're Mac or Windows, has little bells and whistles that make sense for that particular operating system. So for example, if you're an OS X user, you're kind of used to Spotlight to be able to go away and find stuff. And the file fabric has, this little Spotlight thing, and I searched for PDF earlier. You can see it's still here, and it went away and it found all the PDFs that were stored on my file fabric. If I click on it, it'll just go away and download it, or I'll get an option to share. So again, really kind of easy to use, integral to normal user workflows. They don't really have to think about too much to be able to go away and use the product. It's all just how they're used to working. There are other again, there's some bells and whistles here, similar to what we saw on Windows. We can do some stuff where if I drag this up to here, what will happen is it'll actually just get uploaded into a nominated directory and share me a link on my clipboard. It's only a small file, maybe we'll try. Hopefully it won't be too disruptive onto the broadband. There we go. Upload's complete. It's in my quick uploads directory, which is where I nominated, and I've got a quick URL that I can then use. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of the drives. As I said, we also have one that works on Linux too, and it works pretty much the same as what you've seen here. It's just drive shell access. You can also shell out into these drives, so you get like a / network share if you kind of need that. Although we don't allow it to be used by more than one user, we often get asked the question, "Oh, is that a gateway? Can I share it out?" You kind of don't need to. The problem with a lot of gateway solutions is that they have many users trying to target one share, and maintaining permissioned access for those users becomes more difficult the more users you have, because ultimately the sort of operating system has to take account of file locks, concurrent usage, number of users, etc. And often these sort of gateway shares are pseudo shares, so they don't scale very well for that. Effectively, with the cloud drives, we invert that. Effectively, every user has their own gateway, so it's infinitely scalable. You've got 100 users, they each have 100 cloud drives. It's just a normal application install. Don't want to use a cloud drive because you have something that would stop you installing software. Well, we have the WebDAV protocol, and you can just insert something into a startup script and you'll get a WebDAV drive. Not quite as fully featured as what we've got with the cloud drive, because obviously we've got a little more control when we install an app, but still, you've got exactly the same type of experience from an end user point of view in terms of accessing directly from a sort of cloud home share. And remember that all of the data that we can use underneath this is your normal standard corporate data. It's your SMB shares, it's your Azure blob storage, it's your Amazon S3, it's your Cloudian, it's object storage. You know, we don't care. We treat that as just a global file system and a change of a directory. Next thing I want to talk about is on this whistle-stop tour of end user desktop integration is email. So obviously, if you're anything like most workforces, you'll spend most of your time in email. And email actually starts to present us some problems when you're doing remote home users who've got home broadband. You don't really want to be pinging files about, you know, on that broadband. And secondly, you shouldn't be doing it anywhere. A file attachment lives forever. You know, a file link can be controlled. It's more secure. It's trackable. You can decide who gets access to it. You can set passwords. You can set limits. All the things you can't do, you know, when you're just attaching a file. What we've got here is the ability, some integration directly. This is just MacMail. It's not an SME application. It's just part of a user's normal workflow. They can click on the icon. Again, we'll get straight into our normal view. We can choose one of the files that we want to share. We can choose to share it. We get the sharing dialog that James showed in the first session. And just to remind you that each of these options can be controlled at a corporate level. So you can set a default link expiry. You can set a download limit. You can set the need for creating a password. In this case, we haven't set anything. And we can see we've got our share, and it was that easy. So it is absolutely intrinsic in the end user workflow. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to think about anything. It's just there. If we go back and we look at that experience on Windows, and we go to Outlook, and we do a new mail in Outlook, we'll kind of end up with a similar experience. We want to share from cloud, or we want to upload and share. So if we share from cloud, we go through exactly the same thing as that we've just done on the Mac. You know, we'll be able to go through it. We'll be able to pick it. We'll get the same sharing dialog, exactly the same. And again, this is directly, you know, within an application that they're already using. It's not something new being introduced. So you might say to me, well, that's all fine and dandy, but we don't use, you know, MacMail, and we don't use Outlook. We're actually using Gmail. And of course, Gmail, you know, we use Gmail here. Lots of companies use Gmail, and lots of users actually have moved away from using desktop and started to use Gmail because, you know, it's really slick with search. It's becoming more appy-like in terms of how you can use it through the browser. So what we did is we've built our own similar integration to what you see on the other mail clients. You can, you know, just click on an icon. You can go through to your Office SMB Share or your Azure Share or wherever it happens to be. You can, you know, pick something. You can select it. You get the same dialog, the same restrictions if they've been set, and you can choose to share it. And again, you've got exactly the same experience. So again, the thing I'm trying to get across is your data, not new data, your applications, not new applications. They work exactly the same way that they used to work. No difference here. The other thing I'd like to talk a little bit about is, you know, maybe the Office editing. So we've already seen how we can go into the drives and just, you know, double click and open a file. You know, what happens if we're just directly in, you know, Microsoft Word? Well, actually, there's a couple of things we could do if we wanted to. We could actually do a file open, and we could go and navigate to that place on the drive, and you could go and find the file and open it, and it would be downloaded. Or we've made it a little bit easy for you. you can actually open a file, directly from a little set of tabs directly within Word, and they also exist in Excel, and they also exist in PowerPoint. And you can literally, you can just go to your project docs, and if there's a file there, you'll be able to get it. I think we did have a file in the docs directory, and you can open it, and it'll open. And then the other cool thing is you've got this cloud comments pane. So if you want to have, shareable comments across your teams, across your partners, you can sort of add them, and we'll keep the metadata for them. So you've got more than one way of doing that. You might say to me, well, we kind of don't use that. We're used to using, editors on the web. Wouldn't that? We don't use that at all. So again, just like with Gmail, you can pretty much do all of this stuff directly from your web browser if you choose to. We've got this little edit with MS Office. If you click on it, and you've got an MS Office account, it'll go away, it'll log you in, it'll open the file, and it'll let you edit it, which is kind of cool because you don't have to move anywhere. Any saves that you do will go back to the original location. Be that Amazon S3, be that your SMB file share, it doesn't matter. Well, the other cool thing for this is if you're in a team folder, it recognizes that, and it'll allow you to do team editing. So it will actually facilitate you and another user doing team editing of that through MS Office. You can also do this with another editor. So you could do it, for example, with Zoho Office. We support both. Normally, you wouldn't have both turned on. I just turned them on for the purpose of the demo. Again, this is the I guess if you like the Microsoft Office equivalent from Zoho's perspective. And this is pretty easy to set up, by the way. It's just an API key. It works very similar to obviously how Microsoft Office does, supports the same formats. And again, actually, it also supports collaborative editing. So it's kind of just a choice as to whether you would use this or whether you would use something like MS Office. Key piece, of course, again, is that when you're finished with it, you can go away and save it back to the original location. And you might say, well, that's great. What if I wanted to create a new Word file? I've got to go to my desktop, and I'd have to use. Actually, not really. You could just go away and create a new Word file, just a blank one. You can create it, and then it'll try and go away and edit that new Word file that you've got in your default editor, in this case, Office. And the whole thing here is saved back to the file fabric. Transparently, it's done. So that whole thing is kind of transparent, and just like some of the other, I guess you would call them consumer grade solutions. We have things like, you might have seen things like Box Notes or Dropbox Paper. We've got similar stuff. We've got, except we do it as plain text files. And the reason we do it that way is we, again, this whole concept of lock-in. We don't really want to really have you creating, project files that you'd have to then go away and you couldn't get access to unless you're using the solution. With this, you can create the file, it'll come up, it supports markup, it's got keyboard shortcuts, easy to use, often a great way to collaborate and have notes. So it's, again, the reason for it is it's transparent. If you decided you weren't going to use the file fabric in future, you don't need a third-party, parser to try and get your data out. It's just there. Some of these other things you'll have seen here, like HTML document. There's a HTML editor built in. There are other file formats if it's not a Word document you want to create. Site link. If you wanted to collaborate across, something that was on the internet, for example, you could. You could basically have, the BBC site. You can save it, and then you can, this could be a TechCrunch article. It could be a project article that you've got reference to on the internet. Once it's done, it becomes a special type of file that instantly will kind of go away and take you to the BBC once it's double clicked. And of course, you might therein decide that you want to do other things to it. You might want to comment against it. It's I know internally for us, when we've got tech docs or tech articles that we see, quite often they'll end up in a folder like this, and there'll be a whole heap of comments from the devs and the coders, etc., about what they thought of the article or what they liked about it, what they didn't, etc. And it's a great way to collaborate. Okay, so I've shown you some of the end user workflows, a kind of whistle stop tour. And actually, I didn't even show you the sync apps or some of the other things that we've got embedded in the desktop, just that I'm conscious about time. I hope you can appreciate that from a remote working point of view, it's kind of business as normal. Same apps, same shares, same email, nothing different, easily transparent. And from a company point of view, the ability to use these policies here that James showed in the first session, to be able to keep everything locked down, file sharing policies, security policies, so that you feel in control of how that is being accessed. And the other thing that you've got, of course, you've got everything is being audited. So this whole, you can see here, I just made a comment, and then I created the BBC document, and then I did this, and then, so everything is completely audited. So if somebody came back and give you a subject access request because of CCPA or GDPR, you could easily facilitate that, no problem, because you have access who viewed anything, who downloaded anything, and actually you don't even get that on your SMB or NAS or SAN shares today, because it's kind of not built into Windows, so it's really hard to facilitate. So this is just transparent to the end user, but obviously it's not from an IT perspective. From an IT perspective, it's completely locked down. The other thing that we've kind of got built in is this little compliance health check. So we build in, we understand that there are quite a lot of policies there, and you might not necessarily understand, which are the ones you should turn off and which are the ones you should leave on. So we've got a health check report. You can download it as a PDF, and it tells you, hey, you may want to look at these things because some of these don't look right. You've let users make files public. Do you really want to do that? And you say, well, no, I don't really want to do that. So it will take you there straight away, and it'll tell you which option to turn or turn off. And all that stuff is built in from a security perspective. And of course, we didn't touch upon the ransomware protection, which can continuously work in the background, ensuring that there is a transparent copy of data that's always kept. We also didn't touch on how easy it is to, have versions of documents and promote them, even actually through the desktop tools, because of those right-click cloud actions. So hopefully what you've seen is a whistle-stop tour on how we've got things in our product that is not trying to lock you into anything. It's not trying to force you into using new applications. It's not trying to get your remote users to have new things. It's basically trying to work with what you have. That's one of the big ethoses of the whole product of how we built it. And it's giving you the data governance and the auditability, across all of those data sets. The only thing that we're doing is we're keeping a smart index, and that smart index allows us to, do some checks against, PHI data to make sure that you've got no, PHI data. We talked about this, previously. I think James showed some of these options with the content discovery and the categories, and what you could do and how you could have GDPR checks to make sure that nobody's putting data into team folders. We'll flag it and we'll isolate it until somebody can take a look at it. And this works right the way across your entire data set, everything that's under index. And this whole thing is brandable from a corporate identity perspective. And it should be fairly transparent. It doesn't stop you using how you use your products today if that's the way you want to do it. what it does do, it gives you a mechanism to be able to have a tighter multi-cloud ethos for your data sets that leaves you compliant and helps your employees, be more productive. At this point, I'm going to, at the point where I hopefully, touch wood, haven't had a glitch on the demos, I'm going to end my session, and I'm going to leave it open for questions.
Yes, we do
questions.
have some questions here. Yes. So first one would be, does this work with existing NTFS permissions?
Depends, and if you're using SMB shares, etc., then yes, the connector can use the existing permissions. So the answer is yes, if that's the background of the question. Yeah.
Good. We do have some more questions here. So, can I access my data from my phone?
Yes, I didn't show I thought it was, I have another virtual machine that allows me to show the phone. I just thought it might tip my machine over, so I didn't show it. But yeah, we have iPhone and Android apps. Obviously, the Android works on phone and tablet, and the iPhone app, the iOS app, works on iPhone and also iPad. But yeah, we have full multi-channel access.
Good. There is another question here. Do you work with SMB network attached storage, right? Is that right?
Yeah, we work with SMB shares, network attached storage area networks, and we work with NFS, and we work with Microsoft DFS. So we work with all of those from an on-premise file storage point of view.
Alrighty, there's another one here. What if we have local storage on more than one site?
Oh, that's a good question. So local storage on more than one site. If you've got local storage on site 1 and local storage on site 2, then you could have a file fabric on each site. If you want to have site 1, access data that's on site 2, and site 2 access data that's on site 1, we have a feature of the protocol site link that allows a subset of that data to be shared with the other site, and we index the metadata from one site to the other, so that the browsing of the data and the access through the drives is really quick, because all the metadata is local, and you only pay the on-the-wire price when you have to do a download or upload. But you'd have to pay that anyway. So we can do that across more than one site, more than 2 sites.
Great. We do have another question. Are you speeding up access to on-site storage because you're not using a VPN?
Yeah, we're speeding it up because we're using, the drives are using HTTPS access to the storage, so it's kind of web scale access. REST underneath the hood. The drives are using a REST API to securely communicate, with our backend service, which itself means that you have to be authenticated through your identity access manager, and at the point that that's done, then we allow access, to the files. But it's done at normal web protocol rather than non-friendly SMB protocol through a VPN. The other thing is that because we index the actual storage, when we get to the service, we don't need to go back to the backend storage and pull the data down. It's cached, so the browse and read is speeded up anyway. And in the clients themselves, in those cloud drives, they have the ability to cache. You have some policies you can set, either at an organizational level or at a user level, that facilitates how much of that cache you want to remain. But the whole concept of those 3 things vastly speeds up access to remote data.
Alrighty, we have one last question here. How long does it take to install and ingest 30 terabytes of data? What does the production deployment look like?
Maybe the devil's in the detail with those types of questions, because we would need to understand, a little bit more about type of data, type of installation. But for us to index 30 terabytes of data, it's not really the storage size. It's the amount of files, because we index a file, and whether that file is big or small kind of doesn't matter. So if it's 30 terabytes of data, that's millions of files. That's fine. If it's 30 terabytes of data, that's a few files. Then obviously it's going to be quicker to index. So to give you an example, we're working with a genomics company right now, and actually our product is being used on the front end through the drives to facilitate access to for testers who are doing COVID-19 testing. And the storage under management from our perspective runs into billions of files, billions and petabytes of files. So the scalability of the product, because it can scale up and it can scale out, I don't think we would ever have a real problem in being able to, index the files. The deployment, is all dependent on, more detail being required. The HA, the failover, the number of sites, et cetera, et cetera. But typically, our deployments, they don't normally take a long time. In truth, normally, to set up a demo system and have it all up and running, kind of takes under an hour. Even to index a reasonable sized file estate, you'd expect to get the whole thing done and turned around within a day.
Alrighty, so that will be it in terms of questions here.
Okay. Well, brilliant. Thank you for everyone for attending. I hope you found it useful. We'll have a little bit of a conflab internally to see whether it's worth thinking about doing a third session of this kind of series, because I feel that there are still probably some untouched things that we've not gone through. But hopefully this was useful, and of course Mariada will share the recording after the event.
Exactly. Thank you all for attending.